When you look at these major catastrophes, the wildfires out west, the hurricanes, that gets national news and it's recognized. But when we get sprinkled with hail and every roof and window sash and car that's outside is destroyed, there's no big news about it,
Right.
but it's billions and billions of dollars.
How do you balance work and really wanting to build an awesome company and your personal life?
They seem to clash, don't they, if you really think about it?
Hello and welcome to Getting Real with Jason Gorman. I'm your host, Jason Gorman, and with me today is my good friend and the best insurance guy on the planet, certainly in Minnesota, Brad Gombold with Preferred Insurance. Brad, thanks for joining me.
Happy to be here.
Tell me a little bit, tell our audience a little bit about your story about how you got into insurance.
I'm not convinced that I picked insurance or insurance picked me. I grew up in a family business, so I grew up around insurance. It was just somewhat inherent to me. And at the age of 20, when I decided that I needed to shift gears, I went into the family business, and that's where it started. 3 years later, at the age of 23, I opened Preferred Insurance Services, and the rest is history. We've had a great run from that point forward.
What do you think, like from your early days, because obviously it was, much smaller than it is today. What do you think the keys to success in building a successful insurance company have been?
I think at the end of the day, it's all about people. I think the reality is back then and today, technology is fully different. How we communicate is fully different, but it still is about really identifying with the needs of people and being in a position to help them.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know for myself, like when I started working with you, what's it been now, 13, 14 years, it's like I didn't know what I didn't know. I just thought of insurance probably like a lot of people, like this boring thing that you sort of like don't think about unless you really need it. Then when you really need it, you don't even know 100% what you agreed to buy.
Oh, I hope we get to expand on that a little bit later, but I will tell you that's fully true, and we have a lot of that. And I think when you spend enough time in a consultative environment, rather than what we find today in the insurance world are salespeople, not insurance professionals, it's just changed. So it's shifting and it's all fast, but consumers need to be aware.
Yeah. So a lot on this podcast we talk about passion. How did you find your passion when you got into insurance?
It actually gives me goosebumps. So for me, the issue became we had some clients that we had helped. We've expanded some coverages, and then there were some very serious injuries. In two different instances, a traumatic brain injury that could have caused some massive setbacks to a family. And because of appropriate coverage, they financially came out of it in a much better place than they would have. Another one was a broken back situation. And to have those people come back, and I'm 21, 22 years old, and having people come back and share how much they appreciated that we gave them what they needed, not necessarily what they had. And that's a big deal. That became a very that's a cornerstone of who we are as an organization now. So we'll always share that. We're going to take enough time to go through what you have, and we're going to share what's available so that you can then make an informed decision. It's not our decision to tell you what you need, but it is our responsibility to share with you what's available and why it may be important for you.
Yeah, I think that is so true. You've said that for years. It's like, my job is to tell you what's available. You can choose if you want it or not, but at least you're going to be knowledgeable of the things you didn't choose.
Well, I'd say truly over 95% of the consumers out there, when we ask them, do you know what these coverages do at the time of a claim? Aside from comprehensive and collision or physical damage on their vehicles, they really don't have any idea the impacts of their liability purchase and how that can impact them later on. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess I get a little nerdy when it comes to insurance because I believe it's incredibly important, and I've seen the importance of it.
It's funny, to segue a little bit. My daughter started working at a law firm, right? Just got out of college, and she starts working at a law firm, and a big, well-known law firm here in the Twin Cities, and she starts working, and she called me after her first day of work, and she's asking like, what are our deductibles, or not deductibles, but what are our limits, and what are all these things? Because now she's dealing with insurance claims all the time, and she's like, it's amazing how many people don't have good coverage. And it's like she sees it on the law side of it every single day now. And it's like, I know, we just trust Brad. We just have our stuff set up properly.
Well, and I appreciate that. But I think it's important that you're aware, and those watching this podcast that follow you are aware. In the state of Minnesota statistic is that somewhere between 25 and 30% of the vehicles on the road today have no insurance.
Yeah.
And the state only requires that you have $30,000 worth of liability coverage. Well, you don't want that for your family. You don't want to be involved in an accident with somebody that only has it. What if you have to spend some time in the hospital? What if you need transitional care? What if you can't work for an extended period of time? $30,000 doesn't go very far, and it's a very, very scary situation.
So what do people do? So like, what should they do to mitigate against that? From an insurance perspective, is there anything that they can do to, if someone doesn't have insurance, or if they don't have enough insurance, or they don't have the correct insurance, is there something they can do to have the proper coverage for themselves?
Well, it doesn't fully fill the gap, but yes, when you buy your own liability coverage, you buy limits. In our office, we encourage either $250,000 or $500,000 underlying limits for liability. When you purchase those limits, you then get the ability to purchase what's called uninsured and underinsured motorists. Uninsured motorists, the other person that hits you, doesn't have any insurance. Underinsured motorist, the person that hits you, doesn't have enough insurance to pay your damages. It's a largely used coverage, but again, if the person that hits you has $30,000 and you have somewhere north of $500,000 in damages,
right,
you go back to your own policy. Your policy pays you as if it were their policy. It's super important. Again, just not enough education in the market, so consumers are just not aware.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll get to that at the end too. I have questions regarding being in real estate. We deal with homeowners that have claims like on their house, and it's the same type of thing. But back to your start. So you start. You're a young guy. You get into insurance. You've built this wildly successful big insurance company now. How do you build that team? How did you build a team, or what were the steps to building that business or building that team?
Well, everybody's looking for an opportunity, and I don't care who you are. We're all looking for the next opportunity. Coming into insurance is a difficult space, but for us, our team revolves around a few factors. One, shared values, and it's commonplace. Our company values are not something we put on the wall or on our website. They're our internal that's our internal rule book. When we look at it, when we get outside of the lines, we look back and go, where in these values does it say we should act like that or do that, right? So that's incredibly important, and we value that, and you can't touch on that enough. But I think one of the other biggest pieces is empathy. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a challenge. I don't care what face you paint on and lead with. We all have something that stings at that given point in time, or don't understand, or need help with, or what have you. And I think that when you lead with empathy with your team, and your team has that understanding that your clients, prospects, friends, neighbors, everybody needs that.
Yeah,
I think it's just been wildly important in our organization that we put a lot of energy in that capacity.
I know no matter who I deal with at your company for anything. It seems like that's the thing, the underlying, and that makes sense then obviously when you're hiring and you're looking at building people based on values. I mean, it just shows that just the way that they treat the clients is the same way you would treat the clients.
We look for that, and we hope for that. It doesn't always happen the same, and we all have different personalities, so it just differs at some level, right? How we interact, our personalities play a factor in that. The last piece would be knowledge, but I will tell you that's third in line. Yeah. And it's third in line because we can educate people, we can bring them up to speed, we can train them, have other people train them. But if I hire just on knowledge, then we lose out on some of the character aspects that we just talked about, or potentially lose out on that, I should say.
Yeah, some of my favorite conversations with you over all the years is just the business. It's funny, you're in a completely different industry than me, but we have another guy in our networking group that we're on 3 very different industries, but have similar challenges. Like, how do we get out of our own way? How do we build these business? Like, how do you build a business that can scale past yourself? And it's like, that's the thing. Like, you can only serve so many people yourself. If you want to continue to grow and be able to help more people, how do you grow your business so that you can succeed with and through other people?
Well, for how long, I don't know, I can speak for myself. It was a long time, but for how long did you say, I just need to clone myself? If I could just clone myself. Well, you can't necessarily do it, right? Like, it's not real, because even people that have the absolute same values, knowledge, again, it goes back to their personality is different. So there is no such thing as that clone. Right. But for years, I got in my own way as a result of that.
How have you identified talent and learned to leverage?
Again, I don't know that it differs a lot from what we just touched on. I think at the end of the day, we fully look for and expect sound character. That's the leader for us. We've been very successful bringing younger people now into the business. Insurance is not a place that these kids coming out of college today are wildly excited about. Like,
they're
insurance,
not dreaming. They're not in their bed in college and I'm dreaming. I want to get into insurance.
I wished it was that simple, but it's not. So we have to really get people to identify. It's more about relationships than it is, the product, the widget. I'll call it the widget that we put out there. We just do it differently. And the fact that you get people with a big heart that care about other people, they get on board, and they really find stride and have found joy in what they're doing. The people that just insurance was their way of life, and that's just, they've done it this way for so many years. It's not our exact bread and butter.
I know we, a lot of times when you pick say a career or a business that doesn't seem super sexy and it's not exciting, I think the people can radically underestimate that won't be as passionate or fulfilling, but really it's about helping the people. So how do you take, I need insurance on my house. But I can tell you that, having had a closing that completely blew up here a couple weeks ago from an insurance guy that didn't have an association covered properly, and the entire 300-unit association couldn't sell their homes because a person that just thought it was no big deal to just check some boxes differently to save the client a couple bucks on their insurance premium.
Or to earn a commission.
And then literally, all of a sudden, a whole bunch of closings couldn't happen because someone just decided that, it'll be fine. I think this will be okay.
I'll say in my tenure of now almost 35 years in this business, I have found most people care enough that they do good work. It's just those few outliers. And a lot of times, I'm not going to pick on the youth, but you see people come in, and again, you said it earlier, you don't know what you don't know. Right. But when you're on the professional side, you better have an organization that has enough mentorship and oversight to help their young producers that are out there attempting to help the consumer. So you don't fall into those situations, because the snowball effect of what you just shared, and we know this, is not only does that house not sell, but the other house that's contingent on that deal, or it's a chain of impact that is very adverse, and nobody wants to have that conversation.
Yeah. So shifting gears a little bit, building this big company that you've done, obviously very well, and thinking back to kind of like, say, a couple of stages. In the beginning, your kids are really young. You got a family. You got all these responsibilities. How do you balance, we got a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to this podcast. We got, real estate people who are just entrepreneurial in nature. How do you balance work and really wanting to build an awesome company and your personal life?
They seem to clash, don't they, if you really think about it? At the end of the day, you go, geez, I want to be wildly successful. Well, it took me a while. What does success mean? Early on, it was financial success, right? Like that was my big push. I needed to make enough money. Well, for me, somewhat rapidly, I made enough money to where I actually felt like I was successful,
yeah.
and I really wasn't. But I was able to live a good life, and my family, my wife and 2 daughters, adult daughters now, have always been front and center in our life. We made the commitment early on we were going to participate in everything that they did. Insurance afforded me the ability and the flexibility to do a lot of things. I could leave at 2:30 in the afternoon, schedule my appointments through the day up till that point, leave, go do whatever activities they had going on, be at their school for their functions and various activities. And if I needed to go back to work or work at the home office, then I would do that, right? So it really, for us, wasn't that tremendously difficult. However, it changed dramatically over those 35 years.
I think that's the thing. I was telling a guy this morning, is it balance, right? Is it balance that we seek, or is it just counterbalancing? And I said, I was... Gary Keller says, it's the art of counterbalance, right? Where you really, if you just for practice, stand on one leg and just see how long you can stand on just one leg. And what you'll notice is you'll start to tip one way or the other, right? And then as you stand there longer, you get a little weaker. You just notice like all of a sudden you need to grab something. Yeah. And so it's really like, again, the balance is sort of this illusion. And how do you counterbalance? Take time off. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, it's going to feel like you're drinking from a fire hose. You're constantly, again, waking up in the 3-point stance. You have no idea why. You really want to be successful, but then you feel like you don't want to be so successful that you take away from your family. The only reason you wanted to be successful in the first place was to fund the life for them.
Right.
You're too busy at the office, you can't leave.
Well, and that's spot on. And I think I think anybody that scales a company realizes that there are sacrifices on both sides. So, like I said, I was very, very fortunate that we did well enough for 20 years to do all of those family things. Then I spent the next decade where when I thought we were doing well enough,
yeah,
we scaled 10x where we were in 10 years, acquired a few different agencies, did a lot of things, but that required, unfortunately, 11, 12-hour work days for me, literally to the point. I'll tell a real quick story, if you don't mind. My wife and I would meet on Thursdays. We were building a house at the time, and I did not like, we had sold our home. I did not like living in a condo, which we did temporarily while our home was under construction. So we would meet on Thursdays at a restaurant, and the whole staff, what we learned after a while, I would come in my suit. She would have been there, typically beat me there, and we both have rings on, but we laughed and carried on, and it was our opportunity to really catch up, kind of date night. Our kids were off at college.
Right.
But we found out later that the wait staff and bar staff had an ongoing bet. And what happened was one night I left my wallet in the car, so Kim paid, and they were all slapping high fives and laughing and carrying on. And they had bets as to whether we were having an affair or whether we were a married couple, and they had all this going on. So anyhow, in a very unusual way, it actually was a humongous compliment. And when they came out, they said, it is just so unlikely you guys have been together that long and you're that happy and enjoy each other and talk and so on. So you know what? All of this, all the stress windows, everything, I could not have ever been anywhere near as content and or successful without the support of my wife, Kim, who actually now works in the company.
That's awesome. Has it changed? Have you noticed it change? I mean, you did say that, like in the beginning, it was different than it was, say, that last 10 years. But like when you're going through 10x growth, what kind of what did you do to counterbalance in addition to just doing those 12-hour days? Do you take more vacations? Do you take more time off? Like, do you do anything to counterbalance that, the sheer drive?
I would say yes. I mean, not consciously, but early on, I didn't truly value vacation. I thought vacation was an expense that nobody should, waste their money on because you didn't get a thing. Now, keep in mind, I'm young and I'm aspiring to have things. And I think a lot of people, that's where you start. You want to have stuff. And you realize over time the stuff comes and goes. It's not a big deal, but the time spent is the big deal. So we did do a few more vacations, which led to more time away with family, which, has now the last few years, I've taken my foot off the pedal and been able to enjoy way more time with my adult kids and granddaughter and, just trying to find opportunities to spend time together as a family again. I don't want to give that up. When we get stuck in and we're really working, and for me, a couple of things changed. I gave up coaching. I had coached my kids' teams. I coached then at Hamline University for a while, and all of it was in an effort to give back, in part to give back to my kids, but also to give back to the community and then to others. And I think I only coached girls and women athletes. And what I learned in that window also, they taught me so much about how to deal with people and the empathy aspect. What I found was, at a modest level or, they were all competitive athletes, but most of the talent I coached was, D3 level, D2 level athletes. And that personality needed wind in their sail, and it reminded me a lot of me. I needed a pat on the back, and sometimes you got kicked somewhere else that wasn't exactly pleasing.
Right.
And it's like if you just can blow a little wind in somebody's sail, it goes a long way. So when I gave that up, it afforded me a lot of time, and I put it back into the company. And there went that large J curve, I'll call it, and we took off growing. But I knew there were sacrifices tied to it. My wife knew there were sacrifices tied to it. And we took that on and said we're willing to do it. The goal is, to continue to help more people, grow the team to a point that I don't have to carry the weight at the level that I once did. And that, in fact, fully happened. And we have such an amazing team. Most days they wouldn't know if I was there or not there anymore. And it's a really great spot.
Did you, so you say like when you were coaching, you're dealing with that wind in the sail, or that, sometimes we all need that, right? That pat on the back that you did a great job, just like that word of encouragement. How have you built that into your business, or how is that something that you built into your business? Like, how do you turn that into a system so that it can happen?
Well, you're a good systems guy. I'm not. So I don't know that there's a system per se, but I will say, I was taught early on in my coaching career, 5 pats for every poke.
5 pats for every poke.
And if you can take that into your real life and implement it, not just in your company, in your household and everything. You know, I'm human. I was not always easy on my kids. I expected a lot out of them. And so, you know, I think it's important that people just sometimes rein it back and go, you know what, we all need a little joy and appreciation.
So in insurance, so segueing, you know, in a little bit to what are the biggest mistakes you see people do in the insurance side of things, or kind of what are the biggest horror stories that you see?
Well, anytime you see somebody that's underinsured, you know, when we talk through it with people, the one thing we say is this: all right, so we don't just tell people you need this or you should have this kind of coverage, and this is what it looks like. We put the economics to it, because let's face it. I mean, economics matter. I don't care how wealthy or affluent you are,
Right.
you know. But we have many clients that say it's not about the money I potentially have to lose. So when you're underinsured and you injure somebody,
Yeah.
and your policy runs out, let's say you have $100,000 on auto liability coverage, and you injured somebody, and now they're going to spend the next 8 months in a recovery facility and maybe not even be able to go back into their existing line of work.
Yeah.
Well, that 100,000 is gone in probably a week after the emergency room and the ambulance ride, and hopefully it wasn't a flight for life and things like that, right? So that money's gone. What people don't recognize is that what you have, what you've saved, what you own, the state of Minnesota only allows you to protect two things. One, your primary residence up to $300,000 in value, and one primary mode of transportation up to $2,500.
So what if it's more? What if they're, you know, people are in $1 million house? Then what?
Well, if they have equity, that plaintiff has the ability to put a lien on that property. So when it sells, they are going to be compensated.
Okay. So they can only protect $300,000
Correct.
of their primary. So if they live in $1 million house, they don't have an umbrella policy or something like that, then they're not protected.
They're only protected to the limits they have. So whatever you purchase, so as a consumer, those have been the most gut-wrenching scenarios for me. No, I've seen some scenarios where, you know, we had a client that had $11 million worth of coverage, and they had a very, very bad claim, and they paid over and above their $11 million in coverage. That is such a rare instance, and it happened because it happened in the outskirts of Chicago. So jurisdictions matter, where an accident happens, all those things come into play as well. But big picture, just be mindful of the fact that you personally can lose your assets if you don't make the appropriate purchase in insurance. And that's, you know, we take it seriously every step of the way. So people get caught. So when we talk about an umbrella policy, I'll tell somebody, your vehicle, and people tease me because I say, your new $60,000 vehicle, and they say, when did you buy your last new vehicle, Brad? That must have been a while ago. Anyhow, but I would rather see you self-insure the physical damage on that and buy your umbrella, reallocate those dollars.
Right.
Because if that $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 vehicle, whatever it is, that's not going to wipe you out completely. You're not going to like it when it's destroyed, and it's going to be a real hardship for sure. But it's fully different than losing everything that you have because you didn't make that umbrella purchase.
Right. And your teenage, you know, kid was in a bad car accident. Someone else was gravely injured or something, right? And you just don't have the proper coverage on your house, right? You don't have an umbrella policy or things like that. And people don't realize that if they don't have the proper coverage, finding out after the fact is really not the right time.
Well, and that's the conversation. We'll usually point out, like, here's the dollar amount that it costs. An umbrella policy is very inexpensive, you know, and the best value, truly, you're buying $1 million blocks of insurance to protect yourself. And, you know, it can be as low as $200 to $300 a year to buy it.
Yeah.
So
Well, how much was it for you? You were telling me even on my house, but like say for the average homeowner to add sewer backup, what is it, water backup and sewer something or another?
Yeah, well, it's considered water backup, so it can include sewage, could include your from your septic system, could be a city sewer line backing up, or it could just be water. A sump pump fails.
Because ordinarily that's not going to be covered. That type of, sewer backup, water backup, that type of thing that happens at a house, you're not going to have coverage normally without adding that on.
Correct. Yeah, it's not made part of the standard policy, so you get to pick your limit for that. 5,000, 10,000, 25,000. Many companies will cap it at somewhere around 50,000, but it's a very common claim, largely because of failed sump pumps. That's where we see the most claims for that. Where the sump pump fails, maybe you didn't test it. Some people
power goes out,
or you don't have a redundant system or something, right? So, and it fails, and you end up with water in your lower level. And so, those with finished basements, it's a big deal. It's something you really should consider. All homeowners in that space.
Wow. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, people, and it's cheap. It's pretty cheap to add that coverage.
Yeah, it's relatively inexpensive for sure. We make it part of just our standard offering. We don't, at a minimum, usually it's 10,000 that we include in our quote, whether somebody has it or doesn't have it.
Okay.
Currently.
So what are some of the biggest mistakes homeowners make when choosing insurance?
Well, you talked about it earlier when we opened. I think you made the comment, insurance is just something we need, and it's not something you put enough energy into. And I think, candidly, that is the number one mistake. A consumer that just doesn't put enough energy into knowing and understanding what they have. In today's insurance climate, the market's moving really fast. Our economy is shifting extremely fast. So we're told, and we're very conscious of this right now, so your dwelling limits have gone up exponentially over the last 2 years. We're told the cost of construction has increased by somewhere between 50 and 100% over the last 2 years, depending on what portion of construction you're dealing with. New home construction is up considerably. I would say on average 75% over the last 2 years. Well, at that, there are many homeowners out there that do not have enough coverage on their policy. And so we offer some expansion endorsements. Some policies have uncapped guaranteed replacement cost. So we try to make sure we're protecting you as the consumer.
But so many people, like you say, I mean, houses that we've sold, 20 years ago have insurance. Maybe they haven't reviewed their insurance for 10 years, right? They really haven't, they just it's on auto pay, and they really don't, they don't up it. And you look at the replacement cost or the dollars that they have it insured for, it wouldn't even cover half the house.
So for us, we don't look at it just, we have to take care of our client. We would love it. And I think the one thing consumers really need to do is find representation that's comfortable, that they find competent. It really matters, because now you're not paying more money for it. You might pay less, right? But to have somebody that's looking over it, that's helping you with it goes a long, long ways. So I think that's an incredible fact. We're seeing, all of this, 1-800 or buy online stuff. Well, who's really looking out for you in that given instance? You don't have a direct contact. You need to have a person that can be accountable for managing your insurance. And I think that's incredibly important, and truthfully what leads to a lot of that number one big mistake.
Well, and just knowing what you don't know. And that's the thing. If you have the wrong deductibles, the wrong amount, someone hasn't educated you to say, hey, construction costs have gone up. So you pick what would be this minimum amount, the lowest amount you're able to actually get for insurance. But then when you have a claim, you find out you're, $300,000 short of what it would take to actually have a home again.
I wouldn't want to have that conversation.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody does.
Yeah. When you think about the insurance claims, so over the last I think especially here in the Twin Cities, I mean, the last 3 or 4 years have been, what did you say? Was it 2 years ago? We had that was the most amount of claims ever.
Yeah, and I don't remember the statistics, Jason, but I will tell you our last 5 years in the upper Midwest, it's so unprecedented. But the issue becomes when you look at these major catastrophes, the wildfires out west, the hurricanes in the southeast, that gets national news and it's recognized. But when Iowa gets hit with straight line storms and even that gets big publicity. Yeah. But when we get sprinkled with hail and every roof and window sash and car that's outside is destroyed, there's no big news about it, right. But it's billions and billions of dollars that get paid out. And I will tell you, the last year for me, we've been working really hard, trying to keep our clients aware of where the market is, what's going on. It's moving so fast and continues to move. We've had several companies that have departed from the market. They didn't stop doing.
They won't do certain things.
Yeah, they didn't stop insuring their current clients, but they hit pause and said, we're not accepting any new business until we figure out how we can be profitable in this space. And it's a scary spot. We need our company partners to stay in the market, stay on board, and figure out how to get out the other side of this really ugly situation. The insurance industry got hit harder than our general economy. They're taking the general economic impacts. We both know if you took a receipt from the grocery store a year ago and went back again today, it's a lot higher.
Yeah.
That's your general economy. But the insurance industry got hit with what I just had talked about. The cost of construction is up exponentially. So they're still collecting yesteryear's premium.
Right.
But paying out double on
roof
repairs
and siding. And
auto repairs are up 45% over the last 2 years. And I think that was largely COVID driven. But once they start paying that, it becomes the baseline. Then it doesn't seem to go backwards, right?
Go back. So what can homeowners do? Is there anything that a homeowner can do to, like for instance, just make sure that they are set for, whether it's going to be a roof claim or a siding claim? Like what are some tips for homeowners if they have a claim?
So I would say be aware that things are changing and continue to ask for updates. Roofs. Every company right now is figuring out a different strategy as to how to protect roofs. It used to be replacement cost coverage on roofs would last a long, long time. Now, a roof that's over 15 years of age, generally speaking, is going to go from replacement cost to actual cash value, meaning they're going to build in the depreciation for the age of the roof.
For the 15 years. Okay.
Yeah, so if you have a 25-year roof and it's 15 years old, they'll prorate it out to that amount. It doesn't make it bad, but if you can get replacement costs, you want to get it. The other thing is really recognizing what your deductible is. So we've seen many companies, not the companies we represent, but some of our competing carriers that have just made sweeping changes where they implemented percentage deductibles. I just had a client last week that came and said, hey, I am really irritated. I finally settled this claim. I'm done. But I learned I had a 2% deductible on my $800,000 house.
Wow, so $16,000.
Yeah, when they had a $1,000 deductible for all other perils.
Okay.
But $16,000 they learned at the time of the claim. They didn't even know it in advance. So again, I think it's your provider's responsibility to share. They're going to tell you, we sent you the paperwork in that big envelope and you didn't read it. And both are true, by the way. But you should do a review. You should ask the questions. If you don't know, ask.
Yeah. So have you seen, like with townhome complexes or associations, are you seeing big changes in the way that those are being insured?
It's the toughest market. So in the almost 35 years that I've done this, it is the toughest market I've ever seen. I actually had 5 associations on my desk in November of last year, all of which came with wide open transparency. Here's our current policy. Our board, in many instances, our board has approved a 70 to 75% increase in premium. We will take on a 5% wind hail deductible, meaning they're going to self-insure their wind hail. There wasn't a market out there that was available to them.
I think I had talked to you about this one that we had in Oakdale where the association decided to change, right? So it was the 5% deductible, like you say, and the insurance company was going to 10%, right? So it was the only thing that they could get.
Yep.
Ultimately, that caused these homeowners not to be able to get any Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loans. So basically 75% of all loans were not possible. So now you basically are able to do cash transactions or different, creative financing options, right? And so that was really going to significantly decrease the value of those places. And so once the homeowners then got involved, the association board got involved, the insurance company got involved, and they were able to massage it out and get back to the 5% premium that they had before, which then allowed these places to get sold. I mean, so we had just one of the 6 units that were actually under contract to close. All of those closings stopped, right? A couple of them lost their buyers because for a time we were negotiating with them to just be able to get insurance.
So I'm going to go back. I owe an apology. So I said earlier, we talked about, some potential hazards or bad agents or what have you. And now that I've learned enough, I don't believe that to be true. That is what you just described is not the agent's issue. That's the climate that we're in, the insurance climate we're in. We do not have capacity out there you take those large associations and all of those shingled roofs.
Yep.
You can't collect enough money in premium to pay
enough
for them.
Yeah.
So then they still have to then manage and be fiscally responsible to their budgets as an association. And what comes out the end is what you just described, and it's a slippery slope, and we're in a really ugly window. I'm cautiously optimistic. We're, somewhere around Q4 of this year, things will loosen up. Companies will find their way. If we have another bad weather season here in Minnesota, it's going to be really ugly.
Hard to get insurance. Yeah. So for homeowners, if you live in an association, you live in a townhome complex, association maintained complex, just be aware when the meeting is regarding insurance, it's important to get involved. You may not care whether or not, they're voting on whether or not you can have, colored deck furniture, right? that might not be a primary concern for your future, but the insurance, the thing again seems boring, but it may not make it possible for you to sell the property, which would be a big thing.
Well, and it's one of the largest expenses associations encounter. Yeah. So it is a big deal, and I think again awareness. It just starts with being in tune and aware of what those coverages are, and then you can go out and do your own research above and beyond that. Maybe you'll be part of the solution at your association. Investing
in real estate. Obviously, we've worked with you on several different properties that you've bought, some commercial, some for personal. What is your view on investing in real estate, and sort of how have you been able to be successful on that front?
Well, good consultation, really no different than insurance. I mean, I can't thank not just you, but the team you've put behind you, everybody, not just me and my family, who have all worked with you, but for me on many different occasions where, things that I get caught up in that I think I just really want, there's, when you want something, you want it. And to have somebody that's bold enough to say, no, this is a walk away point, there's another opportunity out there. So making sure you're just being diligent and getting the right property, something that's not going to cause you pain down the road, and doing enough research, and you've always put in place, people to help do the inspections and all of those things that I can't do. You can look at a place and it looks great, but it may not be great. But for us, I still think now is a great time to own real estate. I continue to look around and see all these apartment buildings going up, and I'm just flabbergasted by it because of the costs for somebody to live in that space. I'm not picking on anybody, but if they're fully objective as to what they could own as compared to rent, it's a
Whenever
big deal.
we look backwards, it's like I remember, even, when you and I were working on that commercial property that you bought, like at the time, it seemed like, my gosh, that seemed like a lot of money and it seemed really expensive. But then you start fast forwarding years, and you think, well, holy buckets, we should have bought more of them, because you think you forget what time does to everything. It just keeps increasing the cost. And, at any given time, everything seems really expensive when you're considering buying it.
Yeah. Well, I think from a investment standpoint, just be mindful that there is ongoing energy that needs to go into it. So your home is your home, and you're there, and that's your place, and there's that pride of ownership.
Right.
When you're buying investment property, you just have to be aware. I think you're right. From a financial standpoint, it's wonderful, and it makes full sense, but not everybody's wired for it. So again,
Right.
I think you do a great job of making sure that they're not going to find those pitfalls later on. That you kind of lay out what that cost of ownership looks like.
Right. What does it cost? What is maintenance going to cost? And all the things that, again, like the reasons people sort of put it on the back burner is because they don't know what they don't know. And so when you really do put together a cost analysis, and it's going to, of course, take money. But the one thing, when you're looking at investment real estate, it's really like the dollars have to make sense before you make the decision.
I think it's still a mistake when the mistake happens and you don't know it. You just didn't know it. You didn't know
Right,
it. I think that's still
later.
a mistake, right?
Yeah, you find out later. What have we not touched on that we should know about you and your business?
I think we've touched on a lot of stuff, and but I think character matters. I want to believe that we don't just look out for our direct client. When I work with somebody, I look at it through a little bit of a different lens. I look at it and say, if you're involved in an accident with my friend or family member, are you protected to the level that I would want, that I would expect, right?
Yeah.
So it's about our community. It's not just about the direct needs of our clients. What we do, what our clients do, what I may do, that impacts our community or a community member. And so just want to be mindful of that. And I think that when we lead with that, that's a big deal. But no, on a funny note, what you don't know, what most people don't know about me, I don't know that it's funny, but it's true. I was baptized in the ambulance between St. Joseph's and Children's Hospital.
Really?
I was born at 6.5 months, and they carted me away, and I had what was called high-line membrane, and President Kennedy had a child child pass about a year prior, so there was some research that had gone into this. But effectively, your lungs aren't developed yet.
Oh, boy.
And so the quote from the doctor was, with proper management, we can save him.
Oh, my. Wow. Well, that's cool. Well, thank you so much for meeting with us today. Your contact information, we'll have that in the notes down below, so people can, if you want to get in touch with Brad, have their company give you a competitive bid. I would recommend it. You owe it to yourself to make sure that you have the correct insurance. You make sure that you are educated before you actually have a problem. So before we let you go, got a couple of questions for you. Packers or Vikings?
Vikings.
Oh, football or hockey?
Football.
Dogs or cats?
Oh, come on, that's dogs for sure.
Does pineapple belong on a pizza?
It belongs on my pizza, just not my wife's.
Yeah, no, not mine either. Not mine either. All right, and last but not least, what is something controversial? It's an opinion that you have that's controversial that you'd die by.
I don't think it's controversial. Crocs are cool.
Oh, Crocs. Really?
Yeah, Crocs are cool.
What color?
I wear black Crocs, but I'm getting some new ones. I'll show those to you when they come.
Oh, man. Crocs. Thank you, Brad. Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you haven't already, just make sure that you subscribe or like, put a comment down below. Again, we'll have Brad's contact information. So if you want to reach out to his team, get a second opinion on your insurance and make sure you're covered correctly. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.